The greys didn't come with age, they came with goodbyes. With coffin lids falling, dirt thudding on wood, smoke curling skyward like severed prayers, they came with rupture, and memory, and rapture that burned. She leaned her head against the cool bathroom wall as if steadiness could be borrowed. In the mirror, a ghost stared back, a face rearranged by grief. Mira exhaled and breathed. "You really gone, baby?" In the stillness that followed loss, faint songs drifted in from the edges of sleep. Her grandmother's voices, low and strong, they stayed with her now, beckoning, breathing strength into her spine, urging her to unfold. Grief had roots that grew upwards, threading through her scalp like vines of memory, silvering hair one strand at a time. They stood tall in quiet defiance, like soldiers refusing to retreat. That streak of grey didn't feel accidental. It felt inherited, passed down through every parting. Once shackled in dire denial, they now rose like truth unfurling boldly. Each strand a resurrection, each root a remedy, each silver a spell. There was no time for pretense. Not after that. Not after her world upended, her soul scorched, her breath sliced in half. She had crawled through the mouth of grief and screamed. When her voice cracked and silence shattered her, she vowed to rise again. Outside, morning stretched its arms, light slanted through the slatted bathroom window, catching the edges of silver in her hair. She watched how it glowed against her dark strands, as if even the sun had paused to acknowledge the anointing. She touched the roots, not to tame, but to remember. Then the scent came, sudden, impossible. Sweet basil laced with camphor, a breeze of thyme. Her eyes closed, a prayer on her lips. She knew that smell, her grandmother's oil, a potion steeped in lore, whispered chants, hand-picked herbs and moonlit glass jars. It wasn't just about hair, it was about roots. Mira turned off the bathroom light and walked slowly to her kitchen, barefoot, still wrapped in that phantom scent. The cool tile kissed her soles, her heart quieting with each step. She reached into the cupboard's shadow and found it, her grandmother's final gift, still potent. She hadn't opened it in years. She twisted the lid off the jar. The scent rose like an incantation. Sharp, green, faintly sweet. Basil and bay leaf, thyme and ash. Her breath caught. It smelled of childhood, of mourning, of women who didn't ask the world for permission. She dipped her fingers in. The oil had thickened over the years but softened with the heat of her hands. She rubbed it between her palms, then pressed it into her scalp. The silver strands welcomed it like old kin, drinking, remembering it too. Mira closed her eyes, allowing her breath to slow, the rhythm gentle, as though her body were remembering how to rest. She wasn't healed, might never be. Love was both balm and blaze. They had told her in soft and sharp tones alike that she was losing herself, her aunties, her neighbors, her cousin whispering behind cupped hands, that she was too young for grey, that it didn't match the face and body she still carried, that it wasn't professional. One woman laughed, called her Elvira, then the half-joking disclaimer, "Better you than me. I'm not ready for that yet. Don't think I'll ever be." Their voices carried the weight of their own fear of change, of being seen in their fullness, of becoming, of aging, women shrinking, dodging the sculptor's reach. But the men, surprisingly, were different. Not all, but enough to make her notice. A Rasta fruit vendor paused mid-sale to bless her up. A young red on Arapicha smiled, nodded. "Don't ever die that, you look like a queen." A taxi driver slowed just to say, "Miss, the greys look powerful, you know, real powerful." They didn't call it brave, they called it beautiful. Maybe it was a quiet storm she carried, Or maybe they simply recognized what the world feared, strength in a woman who no longer apologized for being. She slipped her fingers into the oil with reverence, an ancient rite. As she massaged it through every strand of hair, her shoulders loosened. The weight of unspoken things, of other people's judgments, began to dissolve. Her grays weren't lost, they were arrival. As the oil soaked into her scalp, Mira's eyes fluttered close. The earthy scents lifted her away. She was small again, her hand tucked into her grandmother's, climbing the long, worn steps towards the hidden temple. Her legs ached, but she didn't dare complain, not while Ma chanted softly, a brown calabash bowl swinging from her elbow. They had taken the long way. Her father had dropped them at the foot of the hill, skepticism carved deep into his brow. "A temple in Lavantil?" he'd asked, disbelief thick in his voice. "Up in the bush?" He waved vaguely at the green ridge behind the last cluster of houses. But Ma only nodded. "Yes, where the trees still talk. God does listen good. And up there, it seemed, God did breathe differently. With every step the air changed, drier, cooler, touched by crushed mango leaves and the rich musk of sapodilla bark. The calls of kiskadis flared brightly, their raucous voices echoing through the canopy. Somewhere the rustling of a manicou settling into its den disturbed the undergrowth. Lizards darted past, quick as thoughts. A black and yellow butterfly clung to their shadows. As they neared the summit, the sounds changed, more distinct. The faint chime of puja bells, the deep moan of a conch shell, rhythmic chanting, the smoke-curling scent of incense. Mira remembered the scent of camphor, the sharp sweetness of jasmine oil mingling with the earth's breath. The temple squatted there, nestled among the trees, unadorned, its chipped white paint and red trim fading into memory. A humble place of devotion, hidden in plain sight. No flourish, only a quiet invitation to be present. They didn't enter immediately. Instead, they veered down a narrow side path that circled the temple, descending into a yard brimming with bush medicine. Fever grass, the pungent tang of turmeric root, the sweet scent of marigold. The air was thick with bees and purpose. Ma taught her their names like prayers: Tulsi for cleansing, Neem for protection, bay leaf for clarity, lavender to ease nightmares. Some bore Hindi names that never quite stuck. She knew them by feel, rough, oily, smooth, others by taste, bitter, sharp, peppery, medicine that lingered. They picked only what was needed, the bowl filled slow, green and fragrant, as if gathering pieces of the earth's spirit. The sun warmed their backs, the land silent watched. Mira opened her eyes to the present, her fingers still massaging the oil through her hair. The memory, vivid, had always lived within her, maybe tucked away in her strands, stored like something sacred. Perhaps that's what the oil was for, not for shine, not for growth, but for remembrance, for connection. After the herbs were picked and blessed, her grandmother didn't turn back towards the temple. "Come," she said, voice low but sure. "We going by the river now." The path they took wasn't so much a path as a whisper through the bush, overgrown, half forgotten, but sure in its direction. A narrow ribbon of trodden earth wound between towering stands of bamboo. The sound of the river found them first, soft at the edges like memory, then rising until it drummed against their ribs. Finally it revealed itself, cutting through the forest, clear and wide, its belly scattered with smooth stones, sunlight flickering in coin-shaped shimmers across the surface. But it wasn't the water that stole Mira's breath. It was the woman. Already guarded, some in bright skirts, hems knotted for ease, silver anklets catching the light. Others wore bracelets stacked from wrist to elbow, long white furls frothing like Marzone. Laughter drifted between them like incense, while Baptist women in vibrant turbans rocked, arms raised, humming age-old hymns. Her eyes locked on one figure in the shallows, utterly other, bare-chested, wrapped in crocus, skin marked with ash. Ropes of matted hair trailed thick as vines. Beads clinked softly, strung from neck to navel. She glided through the water as if born from it, arms outstretched like wings, catching some unseen current. There was a rhythm to her, wild, bone-deep, older than words. Mira clung tighter to her grandmother's hand, but Ma only murmured, "Watch." So she did. The trees bowed, eavesdropping. Immortals leaned. Naked boar whispered. Zombie beads spilled across the riverbank like offerings. The women moved, not in one rhythm, not in one rite, but in a weave of remembering, a sacred syncopation of womb and water. Some bundled herbs and dipped them gently. Others submerged. A few simply sat, oiling white hair while the river anointed them in silence. Then something shifted. Mira felt it first, a ripple in the air, a cool brush at her spine, as if something unseen had passed. Across the river something watched, not quite beast, not quite human, a shape unfinished. The woman in crocus pivoted, sharp, deliberate, and looked straight at her, eyes steady, smile slow, crooked, knowing. Without a sound, she slipped beneath the water, gone. Mira gasped and turned to Ma, but her face was lifted to the sky, entranced. The river kept flowing, the woman kept singing, and the child Mira, skin dappled in sun and shadow, curiosity clinging like dew, stood, not just soaked, but baptized in something older than words, something that had no name, but had always known hers. Now, years later, the water ran warm again, coaxing the oil from her hair in slow, silken rivulets. She stood under the shower as if the river of memory had followed her home, slipping through copper pipes, baptizing her once more. It threaded into her pores, seeped into her marrow. This was not just cleansing, this was communion. She tilted her face into the cascade, letting it spill, scalp to spine, grief to grace. And as the oil fled her body, something else remained, a knowing that this quiet ritual of tending, of remembering, was never just hers alone. It always belonged to women who had walked this path before, barefoot and battle-scarred, the ones who had mothered, bled, broken, birthed and bloomed. Her grandmothers, her friends, the sisterhood of stretch-marked warriors whose strength was carved from 1,000 small, quiet acts of survival. The WhatsApp prophets ministering through voice notes and mango chow. "Girl, that's normal, just breathe, you can make it through." She thought of her tribe, the ones who showed up when her soul was starved, bearing soup, sour jokes, face masks, and foul mouths. Women who knew what it was to lose yourself in motherhood and find yourself again in menopause. Who understood that grays weren't signs of decay, they were declarations. That hot flashes weren't embarrassments, they were holy fire, baptism by estrogen. She stepped out of the shower, steam clinging to her skin like memory. The mirror had fogged mercifully. She wasn't ready to see herself just yet. Not the lines that deepened when she said his name, not the eyes that still scanned for his toothbrush, his towel, his shape leaning in the doorway like he still belonged here. The house was quiet, save for the drip, drip, drip of her hair, leaving tiny libations on the tile. Outside, the blue jay announced mourning like it had followed a brutal, sleepless night, fatigue curling up into her bones, settling in. Some days she couldn't tell. Grief? Hormones? A rogue vaccine side effect? Her body had become its own mystery novel. Every chapter opened with, "Guess how we waking up today?" She paused, feeling the ache. There was no shortcut through this part, no productivity hack for heartbreak. Grief had no manners, it didn't knock. It kicked in the door, plopped itself on her bed, threw its feet up on the furniture of her soul, and asked what was for breakfast. She'd learned to sit with it, not gracefully, not always willingly, but with a kind of battered reverence, a kind of holy surrender. The brain fog was a whole other beast. Yesterday she'd gone to the kitchen for vitamins and ended up staring at a mango like it owed her money. Words vanished mid-sentence. Songs she'd loved escaped her. Once, truly terrifying, she forgot the PIN to her own bank card. Downstairs her phone pinged. A message from Amina. "Girl, you up? I feeling like bandanya left out in the sun, shriveled and good for nothing." Mira chuckled. "Yeah, I'm up, just showered. This perimenopause thing is pressure, we?" Half a hour later, her phone buzzed again. "On my way. I bring in my mother too. She said we too dramatic. We need she." Mira laughed out loud, the kind of laugh that tasted like pepper and honey, sharp, sweet, and absolutely necessary. This was the medicine. This, the shared madness, the unfiltered voice notes, the honesty of women who had nothing left to prove and everything to release. Women who could cry and cuss, to a pot and hold space, bless you and crack a joke, all in the same breath. Women who didn't judge grief, or the graze, or the rage, who didn't flinch when you confessed that sometimes you stood in front of the fridge and wept without knowing why. By the time Amina and her mother arrived, Mira had a pot of fresh corn bubbling on the stove. She'd laid out the pomerac with salt and pepper on her wooden tray, the same one Marcus had etched his initials into, back when they were still drunk on beginnings. Amina burst in first, fanning herself like a queen in exile. "Girl, it hot like sin, I can't take it." Her mother followed, rolling her eyes with decades of practiced dismissal. "All you need is ginger, bay leaf, and a little less drama." Mira handed her a cup. "And all you need is a little more rum in your tea, ain't auntie?" It was the kind of mid-morning that asked for nothing and gave everything. They sank into it, not fixing, but feeling. Making space for heat, healing, foggy brains, and holy mess. She understood that the shifting landscape of her body was a bridge to generations of women who had known sorrow, sweat, fire, and survival. The pomerac seeds were sucked clean, left glistening in a bowl. The corn had been chewed down to soggy cobs. At the table, Amina and her mother sparred, herbs versus hormones, each defending her cure like seasoned pundits. Mira leaned back in her chair, her fingertips instinctively tracing the roots where the silver was thickest, her body's quiet ledger of time. It had started by the river after Marcus died, when every breath felt like a question, and her bones had forgotten how to hold her up. She'd wandered to the old bend, the one marked by a fallen log and the sharp scent of moss, and sat in silence. That's when the women came. Like memory, soundless, certain, known, they combed her hair gently, reverently. One counseled, "Your hair is a growing story. Your grit, not for shame, for strength." Mira never told anyone, not even Amina, but afterwards she tried to make the potion. No recipe, just memory in her fingers, rosemary to stir the senses, river water, night bloom and dew, and her grandmother's herbs. She steeped it in moonlight, she spoke over it, and when she rubbed it into her scalp for a moment, the world shimmered. Not quite her grandmother's oil, not yet, but she would get it right. She had to. She twirled a silver strand from her widow's peak and held it to the light. Marcus's laugh, a ghost, curled through the space. His cologne enveloped her, just for a second, then vanished. One strand burned with the pain of losing her child. Another sang of her wedding day. Each thread of silver hummed with farewell. The mother she couldn't keep being, the lover she had to unlearn, the younger woman she used to be. Goodbyes left marks, not just in memory, but in the body, in the scalp, in the soul. The oil didn't just soften the strands, it stirred what lay buried. The river woman had warned her. People who not ready does find it too strong. They dream strange, wake up crying. Behind her, Amina burst out laughing, and her mother roared. Your father was never menopausal, and yet he did more crying than all of us combined. Mira laughed. She hadn't mastered the recipe, she'd become it. A slow brew of self-love, patience, and resilience. Something old, something true, now stirred in her bones. When the time came, she would pass it on, not just the oil, but the knowing. The world didn't need more cover-up. It needed uncovering. For now, she would savor the quiet strength she'd built, one silver strand at a time. She glanced at the mirror, a silver cascade catching the light in the kitchen. She wore it proudly, like a second coming. Her story, her crown.